it's Jill from Fabric Garden, and I am going to talk about Hey Violet month. Oh gosh, what month are we in? Oh, you'd think I would know. Hey Violet month number 7. This is our last month. So this is it. So we have made all of our blocks for the quilt, and now it is time to put it together. So I love jigsaw puzzles, and this is a little bit like a jigsaw puzzle. So these are all the fabrics. You got this in month 1, your fabric key. So you can see there's a lot of fabrics in there, and not all of them are used in the last month for sashing, but all we are cutting this month is the sashing and cornerstones. So there are nice instructions, super simple cutting. We are just cutting sashing and cornerstones. That's it, very straightforward. But we're cutting a variety of them, and your pattern will have how to put it all together. So when you look at this closely, you will see that what sashing gets used varies, and that's because we're trying to keep this dark light going through the quilt. So before you cut, this is the time to measure your blocks, because you know we made 6 different blocks, and when you're making a sampler type quilt, sometimes all your blocks don't come out exactly the same size, and the sashing, this is the place where we can fix that. So first thing, I don't think you need to measure every single block, but take all the like blocks and stack them. They're probably, each month's blocks are probably about the same size, because we're making the same block that month. But measure those 6 different blocks. They should be 9.5, but you might have 9.25 or 9 3/8. Hopefully nothing more than 1/4 of an inch off, but it can happen. But you want to measure your blocks to see, because maybe you don't want to cut your sashing 9.5 inches long. If your biggest block is 9.25, then you're going to cut your sashing 9.25 so that you aren't stretching all your blocks to fit the sashing. So if you have, some blocks are 9.25, some are 9 3/8, kind of total it up and average the number. And if something is 1/8 or less off, don't worry about it. You'll be able to make that fit. But if if they're all consistently 1/8 of an inch short, then we'll cut 9 3/8 instead of 9.5. So measure your blocks, figure out what's the best length sashing for them. Now, I know that sometimes it is tempting to want to trim the block itself, but what I have found, we have every block except for month 2 has points. And when these points come out to the outside edge of the block, if you trim your block down, you're going to cut your points off, because you need that 1/4 of an inch or so, give or take, from the point to be able to seam your block. If you start trimming the block smaller, you will not have what you need for the seam allowance. And this block, the fabrics are pretty forgiving. If you cut a point off here or there, nobody's going to be able to see it unless you point it out to them. So measure your blocks, adjust what you're cutting your sashing so that your sashing will fit your pieced blocks best. Then this is also, the sashing is also the place where we can correct those weird things that happen on blocks. Like sometimes one edge of your block might have like a little jig or jag in it, that it's not straight across. But if you lay that block on your cutting mat, lay it straight and you'll see where it's not all the same. Then put your sashing right sides together along one of the lines and pin. If you looked at the sashing side, it'll look straight. If you looked at your block side, you might see your block goes down or up a little bit. But when you sew that 1/4 inch seam using your sashing as the guideline, that's going to get rid of all those little imperfections around the edges of your block. You won't even see it anymore. So I love that this quilt is sashed because it's going to allow us to fix any little irregularities that occur in our blocks. And it happens to all of us, no matter how long we've been quilting, nothing comes out perfect. So I started sewing mine together. And so I only have a couple rows sewn, but I thought I would show you. So you can see already I'm getting this diagonal striping of light, dark, light, and dark. So the other thing to remember when you start to put this together, and I've just been keeping this sheet right on my sewing machine table, and because it tells me exactly which fabric goes where and exactly which block goes where. And before I sew a seam, I just take a quick look down. Do I really have fabric M on the left side of block number 1A? Do I really have fabric I on the left side of block 6? I just give a little double check before I sew the pieces together. I just have a fairly small sewing room at home, so I do not have some large place where I can lay this whole quilt out. So I am just working a row at a time. I lay out one row, double check it, kind of double check it as I'm piecing it together. So if you don't have a lot of space to lay out, that's a good way to do that. So the other place to check as you're piecing this together is that all of the blocks you've made have a side that's a little darker and a side that's a little lighter. Some more so than others. So let me find an example here. Okay, so now block 5 is mostly dark. So it is definitely always centered in the dark row. So now here is, I think this is block 3, but it is mostly light, but it does have, actually this is block 6. So you can see it's got a little dark triangle here, a bigger triangle here and there. And then you can see this block is dark up at one corner, light at the other. And this one has a darker side and a lighter side, and our log cabin definitely darker purples on one side, the blues on the other. So not only do you need to watch which block, but what is the orientation of the block, because that may change from row to row, because as you're doing the top part of the dark, that dark is facing up, but as you get to the bottom of a dark, the dark now is facing upwards instead of downwards. So I worked not only with this picture, but I actually worked with the front cover of the quilt too, just as a double check, because which way the block is turned is also important in order to get that color striation. So I'm enjoying the little puzzle of getting the which sashing and which cornerstone and which block. It reminds me of doing a little jigsaw puzzle, and that is one of my favorite things to do with my family. We can sit and chit chat and do that, and everybody can do it. There's no giant skill involved. So, trying to think if there's anything else. So just to reiterate, you're going to measure your blocks. Then you're going to, from your block measurement, determine, do you want to cut 9.5-inch sashing, or is it better for your sashing to be a little smaller or a little larger to accommodate your pieced blocks? When you sew the sashing on, you're going to use that as an opportunity to straighten up any of your blocks. So, and use the sashing as your seam guide. And then you are going to be careful with which way the dark and light are on your block to keep the color striation. And I really hate ripping out, so as I say, I'm leaving this sheet double checking as I'm sewing so that I'm not sewing an entire row together and then on and discover I have a block upside down. Will it happen? Probably, because how many times has that happened to me? But at least it won't happen 10 times. Maybe it'll just happen once to me. So I can hardly wait to finish getting my quilt sewn together. So I will post a little picture out on our Facebook when I've done it and let you know, because I just really think it's really lovely. And I only have 2 rows and 3 sashing rows on, but I think it's going to be really pretty when I have all the rows. So, okay, if you have any questions, if you're not sure what size to cut your sashing, you can always come into the shop, or if you don't live locally, you can call. I can always set up a Zoom link for us so that I can really take a look at your blocks and get a better idea of what's going on. So feel free to give the shop a call, 916-483-2955, if you need a hand. And if you live locally and you'd like me to put together a couple of in-store sewing days where you can work on getting caught up and get this put together, shoot me an email or give the store a call. And if there's at least 3 of you who want to do that, then I will put something together. So have fun getting this puzzle put together, and I hope you will share your finished results with me. Thanks.